Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Today we're continuing to talk about self-envy and self-love, finding a balance, and how that affects our devotional service, how it affects us in our relationships, how it even affects us materially. Vijnanatimivandasya jnananjana shalakaya chaksurum militam yena tasmai shri gurave namaha. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pachadine Nirvisesa Sanyuvari Paschatya Dasatarine. As I studied the subject of humility, and I've spent a lot of time preparing a course on humility, which I've taught maybe for the last 8 years. And then recently, maybe the last 2 or 3 years, I've spent a little time studying low self-esteem. It's very interesting because externally they appear identical, but there's such a world of difference. And as I've often said, very intense humility is a byproduct of spiritual advancement. And very intense, what appears to be humility, when it's not coming from someone who's spiritually advanced, often is a manifestation of a psychological problem. And if we are discouraged by our own faults, our own imperfections, our own lowliness, unworthiness, sometimes the great acharyas use words like wretched. If we're discouraged by our own wretchedness, our unworthiness, our lack of qualification, that is not humility. Prabhupada said that he lacked qualification. He said, I have no qualification to spread Krishna consciousness. And of course, we know how successful Prabhupada was. So, normally, from a psychological perspective, a person who feels they have no qualification to do something doesn't do it well. That's the psychological reality. You need confidence in yourself and confidence in your ability to do something to succeed. So to say, I have no qualification, and then you're very successful, is purely a spiritual manifestation of humility. And it is not a psychological weakness. And I've said many times, humility is a power, but low self-esteem is a weakness. So if I feel I have no qualification, in many cases I won't even try to do it, because why would I? Prabhupada felt he had no qualification, but he didn't feel that he would necessarily fail because he didn't have the qualification. In fact, feeling that he had no qualification was what gave him the qualification to succeed. Because feeling that I have no qualification is genuine humility. Feeling I have no qualification as a psychological problem is disempowering. And it's destructive, actually. So it's very interesting when you compare both, when you go back and forth, because externally they look the same. Now Prabhupada saying I have no qualification is the perfect consciousness to be empowered. I have no qualification. Krishna, if you like, you can empower me. So Prabhupada's prayer on the Jaladuta was, I'm not qualified, but I'm willing to be empowered. And so the connotation of the understanding is, I'm willing to be empowered, I'm willing to be used, and I could see, or I would desire the whole world to be Krishna conscious, and I'm willing to be used for that purpose. So, if I can be used for that purpose, my feeling disqualified actually becomes an advantage because I don't have independent will. I'm not proud, I don't think I'm smart, I don't think I have specific capabilities, which could actually misguide me in the sense of perhaps not allowing the empowerment or the order of my guru or his instructions to work through me, thinking, well, I'm also smart. So Prabhupada, when he's saying, I feel I have no qualification, it's actually the perfect attitude of a disciple, that I'm in this position to be empowered. That's the idea. And I don't think my intelligence and my ability is sufficient to make the world Krishna conscious. But my spiritual master's guidance and his empowerment is. So feeling unqualified means that I feel open to that empowerment. I'm willing to use that empowerment. I'm willing to surrender to it. I'm willing to think in bold ways and make bold goals. Now, if you have low self-esteem and you feel unqualified, pretty much it paralyzes you. You don't make big goals. You're not energized. So that's the problem. But what we see is if people have low self-esteem, it's like you've tied yourself up to a tree and you can't do anything now, but you were the one who tied yourself up. So some examples we've given in the past that I think are worth repeating is what we call globalization. Let's say you're cooking for the deities or you're cooking for the devotees, and somehow or due to neglect or whatever the reason might be, you burn something. So you've burned the rice. Of course, you can cook more rice. You were negligent, you didn't put enough water, or you got distracted. So the right thing to do would be clean the pot out and save whatever rice you can, and then cook more rice that doesn't have a burnt fragrance to it. A person with lower self-esteem might globalize that, and instead of saying, I burnt the rice, I made a mistake, globalization would mean, I'm a bad devotee. I burnt the rice, therefore I'm a bad devotee. You see? So if you have that tendency, you're globalizing one mistake. I did something to displease my husband. That means I'm a bad wife. No, it means you did one thing that displeased him, but you can correct, or now you understand you shouldn't do that. Globalization is, I'm a bad wife. And if I'm a bad wife or I'm a bad devotee, that is discouraging. So I discourage myself. And then if you take that to its logical conclusion, when it gets to a very bad situation, then I forgot to record that. I may have to repeat some of these things. Let's talk about globalization. When you globalize something, you take one incident, one mistake, or one lacking, or one imperfection, you globalize it to mean I'm imperfect or I'm lacking in a global way. That means everything I do must be bad. So I burnt the rice, that means I'm bad at everything. I'm a bad devotee. I made a mistake with my husband or wife, that means I'm a bad husband or wife. I did a math problem wrong. It means I'm stupid. No, it means you did this math problem wrong. You may be actually very smart in English, you may be very smart or very talented in your music class, or very capable in your physical education class. It's just you made a mistake on this one equation. So it doesn't mean you're stupid, it doesn't mean you're bad in math necessarily. So that's how we globalize. And so the logical conclusion of globalization, if it gets very big, is to discourage yourself, that I'm bad. And one of the definitions I've given of low self-esteem is that your self-awareness is skewed, it's not real. So you may have skills and abilities and good qualities, but your self-analysis is much lower, that you don't have these. And arrogance is the opposite, that you have certain levels of ability and intelligence, and arrogance is that you estimate it above what they are. And so they're both problems. They're both problems. You might say, well, isn't low self-esteem a safer problem to have than arrogance, because pride comes before a fall? But low self-esteem, it has its self-discouraging factor. And what I've seen also, if you have low self-esteem, it can be very difficult to have meaningful relationships, especially with superiors, because if they try to correct you, you take it personally. Oh, you burnt the rice. Oh, you're telling me you're telling me I'm bad. No, I didn't tell you were bad. I just said you burnt the rice, which means you'll have to recook it. We can't offer burnt rice to deities. Oh, you saying I'm not a cook, I can't be a Brahmin, you're telling me I'm not a Brahmin, I can't be a Pujari, you're telling me I don't know how to cook? No, I just told you that the rice was burnt. Oh, so you're saying that I'm not really a Brahmin because I burnt the rice. You know, it's globalization. So if you ever see anybody doing that, that's a very obvious sign of some degree of low self-esteem. Or if you do that, it's an obvious sign of low self-esteem. So you can see what that does in relationships. It makes it very, very difficult for people who are trying to help another person with low self-esteem to correct them, if the low self-esteem is that serious. Some people have low self-esteem, but it doesn't affect them in that way. But when it affects someone in this way, it disturbs relationships because people can't help them because they take correction in a global way. Or you're saying that I'm useless, I'm bad, I'm not a good devotee, there's something wrong with me. No, I didn't say that. That's not what I intended. I like you, I think you're great. Just the rice was burnt. Oh, so their self-esteem is so low and they're so sensitive that to be corrected can create serious relationship problems. Oh, you burnt the rice. Oh, you don't like me. And you're probably going to tell everybody I burnt the rice, right? Because you don't like me. All these stories come up. So it's not a good position to be in because you will turn things which are not negative into negatives. You will turn normal experiences into negative experiences, and you'll often harm relationships. The worst case scenario is two people with low self-esteem as partners, friends, or married, because they're so sensitive. And if they just say, could you do this? Oh, why are you criticizing me? You do that also. It's so hard. It's so hard to accept or acknowledge that you've done something wrong because you've identified that in a global way. So if I say you forgot to lock the door, you interpret that as that either you're stupid, you're bad, or my husband is putting me down, when he's not. It's just the door wasn't locked and he's just pointing it out. Please remember to lock the door when you go out. I think the worst thing that can happen to a devotee, well, I can't say the worst thing, but one thing that's very critical for us to be aware of is that we can discourage ourselves when the instructions that we're receiving are meant for edification, are meant for purification, might even be meant for our upliftment if we take them in the right way. But if we take them in the wrong way, it works like a weight over us and pushes us down. So that's a very unfortunate position to be in. If good instruction can't help us, but it actually discourages us. And of course, we're the ones allowing it to discourage us. So we're saying things like I'm bad, I'm useless, and so forth, which sounds like the prayers of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, but he's not coming from a weak psychological position. He's not coming from a position of low self-esteem. He's coming from a position of very elevated spiritual position, where his feeling of unworthiness or wretchedness is not the same as a person with low self-esteem. It's not discouraging. In fact, it's inspiring. So you have to understand that. I've said that before. Humility is inspiring. Low self-esteem is discouraging. And externally, they might look the same. But the effect that it has on us is completely different. I have no love for Krishna. And I might even think, why would Krishna love me? But if I'm a pure devotee and I think that way, that inspires me to love Krishna. If it's a psychological problem, it discourages me. It makes me feel bad or in some way discouraged to engage completely enthusiastically in devotional service. Like, why should I? Because Krishna doesn't care. or doesn't care that much. Or maybe he cares about this devotee but not me. So in this way, we can discourage ourselves. So it's just something to be aware of. And then Alejandra had a comment or something, or a statement, so I want to read that. Makes me remember the reply letter that Prabhupada sent you when you were president in Vancouver. That he wrote you that you must say to yourself, I'm not qualified to manage this. Yeah. He told me that. I'm not qualified to be the president. He said I should think that way. I'm not qualified to manage this, and pray to Krishna to give you the skills through his mercy, otherwise devotees would leave. Yeah. Prabhupada did write me a letter. And Prabhupada was telling me to feel unqualified. And when I read that letter, the first thing I thought was, yes, I feel unqualified to do this. But I feel inspired to do it because it was a service given to me by Prabhupada. So I wasn't discouraged by that letter. Prabhupada was actually explaining to me how to remain humble. And humility has a different flavor than low self-esteem, because you can feel unqualified and at the same time make very big plans to do something, which doesn't make sense if you feel unqualified. And in fact, sometimes in feeling unqualified on the spiritual level, you can make bigger plans, because now you're not thinking it depends on your qualifications. So let's say I want to do something. So I think it would really be nice to do this. And I don't feel qualified, which translates from the spiritual platform, Krishna, if you like, I'm willing to do this, please empower me. So you feel unqualified, but you can visualize it happening, and you're willing to participate enthusiastically, and you would love to do it. So your feeling of disqualification actually becomes your qualification to allow Krishna to make you qualified. So as Prabhupada was just explaining to me how to be humble. Don't feel you're qualified, depend on Krishna to give you the qualification. So I didn't take it in a negative way. I thought that was a wonderful instruction. And I didn't take it that Prabhupada was criticizing me. I actually didn't feel qualified. I don't think any of us should ever feel qualified to do anything that we're doing. I think we should always feel like we are fallen conditioned souls with limited abilities and intelligence, and whatever service Krishna gives us, we're highly unqualified, but we try. We just try to do it. That's the main thing. We try to do the service, and we willingly and enthusiastically do it, and we are intentional about what we want to achieve, and we're also detached about what happens. And so if we don't get the goal, we don't become discouraged, because we don't identify it as a personal failure. I mean, you might identify that I could do more, I could try harder, but you don't identify it globally. Now, we've spoken about this global consciousness before in terms of varnashram. And we've spoken about how modern society it's very much against hierarchy. It doesn't like it. It's been, because Kali Yuga is so degraded, where there's hierarchy, there's exploitation. So we want equality. You and I are equal. There's no difference between us. And let's not create hierarchy. Let's just have everything flat. So spiritually, that's good. There is no difference between us. But materially, there is a difference. We're all different. I'm not as strong as you, or I might not be as good an artist as you, or as smart as you, or I can't run as fast as you. I don't weigh as much as you, or maybe I weigh more than you, or maybe I'm more beautiful, you're more beautiful, I'm stronger, you're stronger. As individuals, there's many differences. So there is hierarchy, which naturally appears in nature. Some animals are more powerful than others. We say, or they say, survival of the fittest. Some sports teams are better than others. Some boxers are better than others, some wrestlers are better than others. So the problem when you try to make everything equal is that when you don't do well in one area of your life, then you kind of globalize that. And then the problem is you tend to forget that you're good in this other area of your life. And so you focus on what you're not good at rather than focusing on what you're good at. And so what Varnashram is to find, or to help you find, or someone helps you find, what is your Varna, what is your nature. It's called Swabhav in Sanskrit. Is it Brahminical, is it Kshatriya, is it Vaishya, Shudra? And then engage that nature in somehow pleasing Krishna and somehow engaging in service with that nature. So let's say I discover my nature is Kshatriya. I like to manage, I like to organize. Or I am qualified as a military man. That's my nature. So in the modern context of things, you might feel bad that you don't also have a Brahminical nature, Vaishya nature, Shudra nature, because of course, especially in this culture, success is evaluated, or one of the biggest ways it's evaluated is based on how much money you have. And so Brahmins traditionally are meant not to have money, or not to have much, or if they have a lot, to use it. So at the end of the day, they have zero. Their bank balance at the end of the day is always zero, no matter how much comes in. But from our society's platform, that you would be considered a loser. So if you're Brahminical, it means you're intelligent. It means you're studious. It means you're clean. It means you're forgiving. It means you're sense controlled. You have the best qualities of all human beings. And then everyone in Varnashram gradually over time is being elevated to come to this Brahminical cultural platform. But in our society, if I have Brahminical qualities and I don't have money, I would be made to feel like something's wrong with me. So I would become depressed. Oh, I can't earn a lot of money. But Brahminical mind is not money-oriented. And if you're not money-oriented, generally you don't earn a lot. And if you do earn a lot, it's just a byproduct of your teaching. It's not that you're trying to do it. And so some may earn more, some may earn less. But earning is not a qualification of a Brahmin. That's a qualification of a Vaishya. But in our society, you might be good at something and not good at something else because it's not your nature. But you'll focus on what you're not good at. And that focusing what you're not good at then kind of camouflages or covers your focus on what you're good at, and you don't see what you're good at. And I might say, you know you're good at this, and you'll say, yeah, but I'm not good at this. But you're not supposed to be good at that, or you don't have to be good at that. So that's it's a very unfortunate reality of modern society when we're trying to make everything equal. There are good points to making things equal. To make things equal, we should equally respect one another. People should have equal rights to live, to especially equal rights in spiritual life, to become perfect in spiritual life. But that equality on the spiritual level, when you try to artificially impose it on the material, then it causes these problems. And so low self-esteem is part of that. And for example, you have a certain nature, but your parents have been conditioned to think that this other nature is what you need to be successful, or this other nature is what you need to cultivate to be considered successful. And so they'll push you in a certain direction, and maybe you're not so successful in that direction. And your nature is to go this way, and you would have been very successful in this way. But you're being pushed to think that to be successful means you have to be successful in this way. And so you're not as successful as someone who has that nature. And so you feel bad about yourself. You think there's something wrong, when in fact there isn't something wrong. You know, some devotees, when they read the 5th canto, they have some insight to understand the nature of the universe. And other devotees, they read it, and you'll ask them, and they'll just say, Prabhu, I don't understand it. You have to talk to someone who does. Is that a fault? Even Prabhupada said to the scientist, you studied this. And they would ask him questions, he would give some answers, but he would say, even I don't understand it completely. So, does that disqualify a spiritual master if he doesn't understand the fifth canto completely? Not necessarily. Even it is said, Vyasadeva may not completely understand the Bhagavatam, but he was reciting it as it was revealed to him, and he was speaking it. But whether he completely understands it is another question, which is, of course, an amazing statement, isn't it? And Vyasadeva is not lamenting, maybe I shouldn't write the Bhagavatam because I'm not sure I understand it, but he was empowered, and so he wrote it. And what does it mean he doesn't understand it? How could he write it if he didn't understand it? Because he was empowered to write it. And so it's like you give a lecture and you're empowered, and after you give the lecture, you say, I'm not even sure I understand what I just said. Somehow or other Krishna revealed it. It was something like that for Vyasadeva. He's not necessarily sure he understood everything that he said, but he was able to say it. So even Vyasadeva may not understand the fifth canto. Isn't that interesting? So we have to be able to enthusiastically engage our talents in Krishna service, and the talents we don't have, because it's not our nature, or God, Krishna didn't give us those abilities, we don't want to focus on them and thinking there's something wrong with us, because if we do, we will discourage ourselves. Because anytime you focus on something which is negative, you discourage yourself, isn't it? And if you focus on something negative, you can come to a point where you just feel like, what's the point of doing devotional service? It's just, there's no, Krishna doesn't care about me, and I don't care about me, and I don't know if anybody cares about me, and what does it matter? And then you end up in this very depressed state. So, I'm not a psychologist, but I did read that low self-esteem is a precursor to depression, and depression is a precursor to suicide or suicidal tendencies. So I think it's a more serious problem than many of us believe, because it can lead to depression, and I've seen it. And it can lead to a very negative psychological state. And when you become very negative, then suicidal tendencies may start to develop. And obviously, that's not a platform from which we can properly execute Krishna consciousness. And in this consciousness, what can also happen is we may feel that other people are responsible for our self-esteem, because we could see that other people are responsible for our low self-esteem. So we may depend on other people to raise our self-esteem. And if other people don't raise our self-esteem, then we may become critical of them. We may blame them. We may find fault with them. And actually they're innocent. They didn't do anything wrong. But we expected them to uplift our self-esteem because we don't know how to do it ourselves. And that can create all kinds of problems. As you probably are aware, expectations can create all kinds of problems. And so a lot of expectations arise within the minds or hearts of people who have low self-esteem because they don't know how to uplift themselves, and so they need it from other people. And so it's kind of a precarious situation if you need other people to uplift you, because other people won't always uplift you. And if you're always kind of pushing yourself down, you really need people to lift you up. And if the people you're expecting to lift you up criticize you for putting yourself down, that makes it even worse, because the very person you needed to show you what you felt was love and affection in a certain way, they gave the love and affection in another way, but you didn't interpret it as love and affection, so it has a very negative response. Just like you have a negative response. Just like sometimes we've seen that a devotee was severely chastised by Prabhupada. And some devotees were devastated by it. They wanted to leave Krishna consciousness, or they may have even left. And so when Prabhupada was asked about it, he asked about how a devotee should process chastisement by their guru. Prabhupada said that your guru is giving you attention, and there's 7 billion people in the world, and right now your guru is giving you attention. That's very positive. The attention he's giving you is to correct a problem. But the fact is he's giving you attention. So that's a very positive thing. That's how you should take it. But obviously if you have low self-esteem, you'll take it in a negative way. That he's saying I'm bad, I already know I'm bad, so this is just making it worse. And if my guru thinks I'm bad, what's the use of going on? Those of you who have a need for being perfect also will do this globalization. You burnt the rice, that means I'm not perfect. Well, none of us are perfect, so that shouldn't be news to you. But if you have a need to be perfect, or it's been programmed into you, then when you make mistakes, it just indicates or reminds you that you're not perfect. And to feel imperfect for some of us is fine, because we know we're imperfect. But those who need to be perfect are somehow the conditioned to think that anything less than perfect is very bad. Then it's very difficult for them when something doesn't go perfectly well, or they don't say the perfectly right thing, or someone says something to them to indicate that something they said or did wasn't perfect. It's extremely hard to process. So we can see when we're in that consciousness, we make it so difficult upon ourselves. And we can make it extremely difficult to be enthusiastic in devotional service. I'm not perfect, you're not perfect. But we have devotional service. Excuse me. We have Krishna consciousness, and Krishna takes us, even though we're not perfect, and Krishna accepts service from the imperfect devotees. And if the service is imperfect but is done with love and bhakti, Krishna accepts it. And if it's done perfectly without love and bhakti, he doesn't want it. Get out of here, throw it away. Lord Chaitanya would often, in traditional culture, sannyasis should take meals at the homes of Brahmins, but he took meals at the homes of his devotees, not Brahmins. Because it wasn't about following these rules and rites and rituals perfectly. It was about where there's devotion. So I've said this before, and I want to say it again because it really balances this problem of not being perfect or lacking in some way and still being able to please Krishna. We spoke about this last week, and it's a very important point, that your material ability is not what pleases Krishna. Now, it can't, I'm not saying it doesn't please Krishna, but you're not dependent on pleasing Krishna to have certain material abilities or certain degree of intelligence. If that were the case, then only people with specific abilities and intelligence could please Krishna, which is obviously untrue, and obviously you couldn't spread the Krishna consciousness movement that way, because everyone you gave a book to, you would have to ask, what are your qualifications, what's your IQ? And if it's too low, well, I can't give you a book. Sorry, because God won't like you, because basically you're below average. So it's not like that. So it's very important to always remember that. It's not my material qualifications that are necessary for pleasing Krishna. And then if we go back to the point of qualification, it's not, then even if I don't have material qualifications, if I have spiritual qualifications of sincerity and willingness to be used, Krishna can use me. Right? You agree? Please agree, because it's very important. So now there's some comments I saw there. I want to make 2 other points. Before I go further, a lot of what I'm expressing here are my own experiences in my travels and dealing with devotees in one-on-one and in group situations, and going to temples and learning from devotees what's the situation at the temple, what the challenges devotees have, and then also learning individually. And when I've seen devotees, and this is not global or universal, but I've seen devotees who have low self-esteem issues, they can tend to be very critical of authorities. As I was saying before, they have high expectations of love and affection that should come from authorities, and when they don't get it, or they... See, but the problem is sometimes when you have low self-esteem and you become critical, you kind of create a situation where you have to be put in your place, because if you become very negative, very critical, naturally authorities are going to talk to you and say, this is creating a bad atmosphere here. So you kind of engender, in a sense, the wrath of authorities because of your own lack of self-satisfaction or your own expectation of what authority should be. So I've seen often in many cases that there's a cycle with people with low self-esteem, and they're very unhappy, they're very unfulfilled, and they depend on other people to make them happy and fulfill them, so they're always complaining, and it's so hard. What I've seen is a lot of devotees sometimes, when people have low self-esteem, they're trying to help them, but it's like they're like a broken record and they can't help them, and then the person kind of blames them for not helping them, and every time they need help, they want you to be there, and if you can't, you say, I can't do it this week, so you don't like me, you don't love me, then what's the use? I don't care, we'll never talk again. These kinds of reactions. So I've seen devotees just in this situation destroy relationships, and even destroy relationships with authorities, which makes it a little difficult for them to visit temples, and even in cases sometimes they've been restricted from visiting temples because they become very verbal about their criticisms, because they so much need positive input. And I've seen also, when authorities were not being bad, they interpreted it as being bad. Authorities were just dealing with what they had to deal with. Or like you might write somebody who's very busy and they may not get back to you for a couple of weeks, and you might think, oh, they're neglecting me, they don't think I'm important. No, it's just that they're busy. They may get hundreds of emails a day, and what if they're traveling and doing workshops or festivals, and 2 weeks later they just they have to go through 1,000 emails in the next few days. And if they have that many emails, it's even possible your email might get skipped, especially if it's a long letter or it's a complicated issue that takes time to think. It just, it might get opened, read, and then closed. Okay, we'll get back to this, and then lost in the hundreds of emails that came after it. So, if you interpret, this authority or my guru, they don't like me because they didn't answer, or it took him so long to answer, or I wrote him a 25-paragraph letter and he wrote 3 sentences back. Well, obviously, if he's getting hundreds of emails a day, 3 sentences is about all the time he has, unfortunately, to reply. And so we don't want to take it personally. But when we do take it personally, then, he doesn't like me, I thought he would help me, I had expectations, they're not being met. And then what was once a good relationship becomes scarred, because you feel, your guru or your authority, or whoever it is, your husband, your wife, they're not affectionate to you, they don't like you. So it's extremely problematic to be in this situation. It's very self-destructive. And that's why we're taking so much time to talk about this. I just want to share with you that in my experience, especially recently, because I've done quite a lot of counseling in the last 3 years as opposed to the previous 45. As I've become more, I've made an effort to be more prominent on the internet, on Facebook, and as a result, every day I get emails and Facebook messages, 3 or 4 or 5 messages of people with problems who want help. So I've become much more aware than I have in the past of the problem of we ourselves becoming our own worst enemy. And I read a quote I mentioned in another class. So someone said, we're not only our own worst enemy, we're not just our own worst enemy, we're our only enemy. So it's true, we're really our only enemy. Because someone else may be an enemy, but I don't have to let that affect me. But if I let it affect me, then I become my own worst enemy. So when we degrade into a position of low self-esteem, it has very negative ramifications on us, and so then we become our own worst enemy. And as I'm saying, it disrupts relationships. And in Krishna consciousness, relationships are very, very important. In fact, in Nectar Devotion, it describes in text 4 the 6 kinds of loving relationships. In text 5, it describes the 3 classes of devotees, lower, middle, and higher. And because the relationships you have with them will vary according to your position and their position, so then it describes, so we can understand our position and we can understand their position, so we can have the proper relationship. So if someone's junior, we should be merciful. If someone's equal, we should be open-minded, friendly, helpful, reveal our hearts. If someone's superior, we should offer them service, we should hear from them like that. So we have to know, where do I stand, where do you stand? Not that you go around with a meter, oh, you're at a level 6, I'm 6.3, so therefore serve me. It's not like that, exactly. But they're general symptoms, and some things are obvious. You've been a devotee one day, he's been a devotee 10,000 days. You, the 10,000 day devotee, should be helping you. You're beginning. So, but my point is that relationships are so important that Rupa Goswami dedicates these verses to, in other words, understanding your level of Krishna consciousness and how to get the next level is important. If you're a Kanishta Adhikari, there's certain symptoms. You tend to be materialistic, you do devotional service for material reasons, you don't recognize devotees, you just think it's you and God. So and then you're not preaching, you're not helping people, you don't know the Shastra that well, your faith is weak. And then second class devotee, they have stronger faith, they're beginning to understand Shastra, but they can't defeat others. They help conditioned souls, like that. So you want to know these levels so you can go from first to second to third, topmost level. But it's interesting, in this scenario, he particularly made this demarcation so that we could better understand how to associate. Because in general, it's just to understand how to graduate from one level to another, what the symptoms are, so that you can strive for those symptoms. But here, it's about association. So association is very important, and unfortunately, and I see this all so often, I'm having so lately, Krishna's given me so much first-hand experience of this, that if a person has low self-esteem, not everyone, but some, it can be very detrimental for relationships, because needs and expectations to be loved are so high that if they don't get it, it can be very difficult for them. And also, those of you who are looking for perfection, I have a good suggestion of looking for perfection. Go back to Godhead, because that's where it's perfect. And if you're looking for perfection here, or you're looking for perfection in other people, it's very, very much, you're going to torture yourself. And if you're looking for perfection in yourself, you're going to quadruply torture yourself. And Prabhupada never told us that we have to be perfect. Or he defined perfection. Or what's perfection? Serve Krishna sincerely, that's perfection. So that perfection, if you're looking for perfection, that perfection you can do. Be a sincere devotee, try to chant your rounds well, try to serve the proper attitude. That's your perfection. That perfection you can achieve. In Krishna consciousness, because it's unlimited, we have different definitions of perfection, or different degrees of perfection. So perfect, most perfect, more perfect, perfect, more perfect, most perfect. So, Prabhu, you're perfect, and you could be more perfect, and someday you'll be most perfect. So what's perfect about you? You've given your life to Krishna. You're perfect. Can you be a better devotee? Yeah, you could be more perfect. And can you become Uttama Bhakta? Yeah, and you can become most perfect. So materially, it's like it's either perfect or it isn't perfect. In Krishna consciousness, yeah, you become a devotee, your life is perfect. Now that you become a devotee, your life is perfect. All those of you who need perfection, here it is. Your life is perfect, you become a devotee. Now make it more perfect. Rather than thinking it's not perfect, it has to be perfect, black and white. No, it's already perfect. And this devotee was asking Franz about the definition of low self-esteem. It just means that you think you're lower than you are. You have certain capabilities and qualities, but you've been programmed to believe you don't have them, there's something wrong with you, there's something bad about you. And that programming usually came from growing up in this life or another life, and people who have told you that you're not perfect, you're not smart, you did something and someone said, hey, stupid, you're so stupid, why'd you do that? And then you took that stupid to mean, in general, you're stupid. Like for myself, there were certain things that I was good at, and mechanical things was not one of them. And I told a story, I think a few months ago, how I was trying to put something together and I couldn't. I gave it to a devotee, and in like 5 seconds he put it together. So I wasn't good at mechanical things, but I always thought, well, that's just one thing I'm not good at, so that's one area of my life I'm not going to go into. But if I think, because I'm not good at something mechanical, I'm stupid, then everything I do, I won't do well because I think I'm stupid. And although I actually may be very good at something, I won't realize it. So low self-esteem is to not have an accurate assessment of who you are. It's not always easy to have an accurate assessment of who you are, because the assessment is usually coming from other people who are telling you who you are. Okay, Franz, this is who you are. You're smart, you're not smart. You're attractive, you're not attractive. You're good at this, you're not good at that. And so we tend, especially if we're young, to listen to what other people say about us and then mold an image. So if you grow up and someone says, you did this, you're really stupid, you'll never amount to anything, you're just a loser, And that's what you hear growing up. It may not be true, but that's how you'll think, because that was your programming. So obviously if you think that way, then you live that way. And then if I come along after you become a devotee and say, oh Prabhu, you burnt the rice, that was stupid. And then again you hear this stupid word, it just destroys you. And then you just go in your room and stop chanting. And just pack your bags and leave the temple. I'm not exaggerating. This is like real world stuff. This is like, so I'm going to go back, there's some questions here. Okay, we're in Russia now. We're in Poland, we're in Russia, we're in Amsterdam. Excuse me, I have to... Okay, I think I could back to the next question or comment from Krishna. Karshini. Magorjata. Magorjata ke Karshini. I have a question. Is it really possible to have proper and healthy relationships with Guru, having low self-esteem? Guru-to-Stai relationship is all about giving instructions and correcting. What I've seen is that it is. But it depends. It's like low self-esteem is a disease. So is it first stage, second stage, third stage, fourth stage? Has it infiltrated? And where has it gone? Has it gone up the spine? Is it From my experience, people who have low self-esteem may have amazingly good relationships with their guru, but at the same time, for them it's more of a challenge to take instructions. But at the same time, if the guru is aware of this, he may be more careful about giving instructions. He may be more careful. And it's a challenge for the guru, because sometimes the guru can see the problem, and he can see that the problem is not going to go away unless he points it out. and then he points it out, and then the disciple goes away. So, don't live, don't die. You can't solve it one way or the other. Usually I would think if the disciple is sincere, they would come back and realize that the Guru was right. But for other disciples I've seen who have low self-esteem, if they're just different, they have different personalities, and it's not always difficult for them to take instruction. But the Guru needs to be a little bit sensitive. And the disciple also has to be a little bit aware of their problem. And I think the more the disciple's aware of their problem, that I do have low self-esteem issues to one degree or another, I think, which we all have to some degree. But some of us, it's so minute, it's not a problem, it doesn't affect us. So, in answer to your question, it would depend on the individual's personality, it would depend on the nature of their low self-esteem. It would depend on the nature of the relationship between their Guru. And if they feel that their Guru is always affectionate, even when he chastises, then they'll take the chastisement as affection. But in some cases I've seen when the level of low self-esteem is very severe, it's like 4th stage cancer, then instructing is very, very difficult to instruct that disciple, because you always run the risk that they'll take it personally, and then they'll interpret that as you don't love me, you've rejected me, when actually you were just trying to help them, and you could see the problem, and you're just trying to point it out, and you couldn't tolerate seeing this person suffer, so you wanted to point it out, but pointing it out was very heavy, and then it was taken, as I said, globally as an attack on themselves. And that's because on if it's a deep scar on an emotional level, then like intellectually, because a lot of these, they have to get more professional help. So if you have very serious self-esteem issues, you should get help. There are books on it and courses or whatever, because it could make it difficult to have a healthy relationship with your spiritual master. I think it also depends on expectation. In other words, let's say you have low self-esteem, but your expectation from your spiritual master is not that he's going to be the one to raise your low self-esteem. Or when he chastises you, you see that as love also. So then it's not a problem. But if your self-esteem is so low and you're so sensitive, then if your Guru doesn't smile at you one day, you could be devastated by that. And you might think he doesn't love me. You might even give him up. You might even give up devotional service. And that's extremely unfortunate when it's not actually a spiritual problem. It was actually a psychological problem, but you weren't aware of it. So then you thought the problem was coming from your Guru, and because your Guru didn't live up to the standards you expected, then you reject him or you distance yourself or whatever. Or as Krishna Karshani has told me, that some of her devotees she knows have left their Gurus for this reason. They felt neglected or unloved. But probably is because they were needing that love from him, which was far beyond what he could give, or far beyond his job description. Everyone has to understand the Guru's job description. Okay, he's a father, but he's also a Guru, he's also a friend. He's not going to be your husband, and he can't entirely replace your material father. And many devotees had bad relationships with their fathers. And so, okay, he is your father, but you have to understand it in what he can do and he can't do. You have a father, you only have a few kids, brothers and sisters, but a Guru has hundreds or thousands. So obviously it's going to be different. But he's a spiritual father for sure. So, getting your expectations clear is important. And so my point was that people with low self-esteem often have expectations which people can't fulfill because they lack love so much. It's like, there's this really funny story. Lord Chaitanya Nityananda went to the house. Whose house did they go to? I forget whose house. Maybe it was Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's house. So they were eating prasadam, and Lord Chaitanya was saying, oh, there's too much prasadam, I can't. And Lord Nityananda ate it all. He goes, basically said, that's just appetizer, where's the meal? And Sarvabhauma, whoever it was, or Devotee, I know it was a Devotee, said, well, that's it, we served everything. He goes, I'm not satisfied. You know, it was just crumbs for me. So it was a joke, he was joking, you know, and they would joke back together, and, you know, I'm frustrated, and they would throw prasadam, you know. So, you know, it's a little bit like that if a person suffers from a very severe case of low self-esteem, then they're like a hungry person who can't be filled up. So no matter how much love you give, they want more, they expect more, they need more. When in bhakti, we're supposed to be giving love. Of course, we get love from our other devotees, friends, seniors, spiritual masters, husbands, wives. But our main attitude is to give love without expectation. And so that's where the problem comes. It's like, you know, I did so much for my guru, but he didn't give me this. So now there's expectation. Okay, expectation, it's understandable, we're human beings, but you have to be careful what you expect. And pure bhakti is without expectation. You know, okay. You know, like I think Tamal Krishna Maharaj tells a story where he made like a super sacrifice for Prabhupada. And for some reason, and you know, achieved amazing success, and for some reason, Prabhupada just didn't say anything, which he later understood. I forget the reason, maybe some of you know, have read these stories, or his disciples if you're listening, but I think it was just, or other devotees have told the story also, that there was some need for recognition, and so even though they did great service, Prabhupada just didn't give it, because he could see that that was a motive, and he wanted to teach, don't be motivated by the desire for recognition. And then the devotee understood it. And then later on, that when the devotees became humble, then they saw that Prabhupada gave them a lot of recognition. So, it's interesting, isn't it? Like, you know. So, I don't want any of you to have trouble in your relationships with devotees, especially in your spiritual master, because you lack self-esteem for whatever reason. You should do something about it. Hopefully these classes, I don't know if these classes will solve your self-esteem issues entirely, but at least they'll bring awareness to how it's manifesting, and you could see it in yourself or see it in others, and so therefore bring awareness that there are things you can do. And so I'm sure from these classes you'll see there are things you can do and ways to change your attitude and behavior, but if it's a more severe case, you will need to do deeper work, because as we said in one of our first classes, it's not just knowing, but you have to feel differently about yourself. Because part of the definition of self-esteem is to know that you are capable and intelligent and lovable and worthy and so forth, but to not feel that way. But you don't feel that way, because you've been programmed to feel you're not capable, intelligent, and lovable and so forth. So that's the definition of low self-esteem. To understand I'm good at this, and I'm capable, and so forth, but not to feel it in my bones, in my heart. I don't feel it. So if you suffer from that, then you're going to have to do some work, so you feel in your bones, you just feel okay. I'm normal like everybody else. And if I'm chastised, then that's good. You know, I can learn something. I don't have to fight it. I don't have to reject it. I don't have to, you know. You can ask for clarification. Guru Maharaj, what did you mean by when you said that? Because that was a very heavy statement. You know? And then he explains that I meant that you're not understanding this particular instruction, or your attitude is very detrimental now to your bhakti, and you somehow developed the wrong attitude, and I would like you to correct it. That's what I meant. Oh, and then the devotee said, okay. So you're now at normal, so now you can understand these things without identifying them as a failing in your life. It's just you're not able to understand or apply something as well as your guru or your senior wants you. So it's just very simple. It's very normal. Nothing to do about you, and it has nothing to do with the relationship. Oh, he doesn't like me, he said this. No, it means he likes the other disciples. And then this is all very Kanishta thinking. Because Kanishta doesn't know how to associate with other devotees. And sometimes Kanishta, in one definition of Kanishta, is they don't even recognize Guru. But in some cases they do, in some cases they don't. So, thank you for that question. So we have more. Dr. Colin, what is a viable practical solution to building self-esteem in those who are a little short of it? You have to, one of the things you have to do is you have to be able to feel, as we're saying, understand, but you have to be able to feel that you're okay. So how do you help someone feel? If we're, say, the context of your question here, let's just use the context of your question that you're trying to help somebody, but that somebody could also be you. So you will accept the answer, either it's you or you're helping someone else, as the case may apply. So I'll do it in the sense of helping someone else. You want to help them recognize their abilities, the goodness in them, recognize what they're good at, the good things they've done in life. You want to get them to feel okay about themselves. And you want to help them realize that their self-perception has been programmed by other people. So other people told them this is what you're like. It wasn't that you understood what you're like. Just like in a philosophical sense, we grow up in a materialistic culture. So in the materialistic culture, we've been programmed by other people to identify with the body. Right? Isn't it? So if we grew up in a spiritual culture, we would have been programmed to identify as the soul or as servants of Krishna, part of Krishna. So in a similar way, people are molded materially. So people have told them things about themselves, and that if they were good things, then people will be more positive. If they're bad things, people will be more negative. So we want to help people understand that your self-image is programmed by others. It's not necessarily what you thought. And I've told devotees before that somehow or other, my nature, it is not something I cultivated, is I tend to be a bit independent. And so people's opinions of me, I would just naturally think, who cares? What you think. I know what I am. I don't have to get my opinion from you of what I am. So I think that's helped me and at least protect me to some degree from people who might have said, oh, you're not good at this, you'll never succeed at that. And because, that's happened many times when people have told other people, you're not smart enough to do this or capable. And those were some of the greatest inventors and writers and artists and musicians were told that. So they just had a nature where they believed in themselves. So they didn't care what other people said. And so those people are less molded by what other people say and more molded by their own conception. No, I'm better than what people say. You say, I'm not going to, no, I'll show you I can do this. So that's the nature people have. But most people, especially if they're very young and they've been programmed to be, oh, you're not that good, and you're not as good as your brother, and why did you do that? That's so stupid. Only stupid people do that. And can't you do anything right? And why? Even some parents have told their children, why did you have to be born? You're just a burden. Believe it or not, kids have been told that. So you could imagine you're 5 years old and you've been told, you're just a burden. Well, I wish you weren't born. What image do you get of yourself? You get the image of yourself that you're useless. Your life is useless, you're worthless. So it's very easy to understand. A person like that could go into a severe state of lack of self-esteem and depression, because when anything could trigger that feeling that I'm useless, I'm worthless. Like your guru says something, you expected love, you got chastisement. So that then would connect with this program you got that I'm worthless, useless, what's the point, why should I go on? That you could see how people like that could leave Krishna consciousness. So you want to help people understand number one, those concepts that you have about yourself have been conditioned by other people. They're not what you think about yourself, it's what they think about you. And number two, let's actually look objectively at what you are. What are you good at? What do people say about you? What do people like about you? What do you like about yourself? Now, my experience is that when you do this exercise to ask people what they like about themselves, what they're good at, the deeper the self-esteem issue, the harder it is. And sometimes what happens is people can recognize what they're good at. They say, I recognize what I'm good at. But this exercise is hard because they realize that they never actually recognize it. Like they can recognize it now, but they don't normally recognize it. They don't look at what they're good at. And so it can be that exercise can be a little traumatic for some people because they realize that they never look at the good. Now, some of you might be thinking, and I think it's valid if you are thinking this way, but shouldn't we, because we want to please devotees and we want to get feedback from devotees, shouldn't we be concerned about what other devotees think of us? And in general, yes. Especially senior devotees, because they're guiding us. So what we do, we should be concerned. Am I doing the right thing? Am I on the right path? So I should be concerned. Or do they see a fault in me? I should be concerned. But there's a balance there. Because if we look at it more like, I'm going off the path, this senior is putting me back on the path, I should definitely want to know if I'm off the path and how I can correct myself. So yes, but we don't want to be molded by someone who doesn't have our self-interest, who doesn't love us, or who doesn't have the skills to help us become emotionally healthy. So, I mean, that happens a lot with parents. And I would imagine, and I know this is a controversial statement, but I would imagine some of our gurus, esteemed godbrothers, who have left Krishna consciousness, who were gurus, would probably admit that they didn't always deal with disciples in a way which they should have, which was the best. So sometimes it could even happen, and I'm sure some of our esteemed gurus who were very elevated devotees might say that along the way they made mistakes. They said the wrong thing to a disciple that they shouldn't have. So that can happen. But the higher the stronger our self-esteem is, the more we can accept, even if my guru yells and screams at me and jumps up and down and tells me I put 1 grain too much of salt in the sabji. We'll be able to take it because we'll feel their love and we'll know they love us. There's one guru, and sometimes he was so personal with his disciples, and he was so loving with them, and like they all knew it, they all felt it. It was just like, it's like amazing. That was just his nature, loving and personal. Wow, electricity. The storm is. What time is it now? It's 9:30. So the storm is about, 12 plus. It's about 18 hours away. But we're starting to get it as it comes up. So he was sometimes, he was just very personal and very affectionate and very open and kind. But he had this other side where he wanted to train his devotees how to do everything perfectly. And he'd be very heavy if they made a mistake, like really heavy, like sometimes like thunderbolt heavy. And one thing I noticed is that because his disciples understood how much he loved them, that heaviness rarely ever was an issue for anyone because they felt the love. So, but if you can't feel the love because of your own emotional problem, then when you get chastised, then it could be a problem. But in another thing, Colin, that I find is good, is that make sure that person who is having self-esteem issues is not surrounded by people who are putting them down. Make sure they're surrounded by people who are bringing them up. Like a lot of, unfortunately, sometimes we're married to someone who puts us down. And so if you already have low self-esteem and you're married to someone who puts you down, That is a huge problem, and something has to be done so that your husband or spouse understands your needs and your issues, so that they can, instead of pulling you down, can push you up, can honor you, can help you. Because if you have low self-esteem and you're always being put down, wow, that's a huge problem. So that's some idea. So Venurati from Lithuania says, if you need examples for this lecture, you can just take me. And it's kind of upsetting, but still, thank you so much for speaking about this. Yeah, well, hopefully, Venurati, this speaking, this will help you, and you'll understand the need to improve. And it's not that you can't improve; it's just that you've listened to the wrong people. Venurati, you have to be like me. You know what my father said to me once? He said, he was trying to correct me. I can't remember the incident, trying to instruct me or whatever. He said, you never listen to anything. You never listen to anybody. Which I think was why I became a devotee, because I didn't listen to anyone, anything, because I thought everyone and anything had nothing to tell me. But when I read Prabhupada's books, I said yes. So like Krishna kind of protected me. I never got contaminated by science and Mayavad philosophy, because I just was very independently minded. I wasn't influenced by what other people think. I wasn't interested often in what other people were thinking. So that helped me become a devotee, and it helped me maintain some level of self-esteem, because I developed it based on what I thought of myself, not what others. So Venurati, if you can become a little bit like that, that would be good. Develop your own. You don't want other people's conceptions of you. You want to develop your own. And so you just look at, what do you do well? What are you good at? What do people like about you? And so forth. What do you like about yourself? And that's the reality. Not the negative thinking is not the reality. That's the whole point. Low self-esteem means your self-conception is not real. It's not the way it is. It's been deflated by somebody, and then you've accepted it. So you don't have to accept it. You can now look at the reality. What are you good at? What kind of intelligence do you have? Etc., etc. Does your guru love you? Of course. And so forth. And you see, the reality is different. So, Hare Krishna. I'm not reading the comments. Why some devotees have low self-esteem? The same reason why anyone has it. It's been programmed. It's either a carryover from a last life and or programming in this life by people and events around you that impregnated ideas that something's wrong with you and covered you from being able to acknowledge what wasn't wrong with you, what was good about you, and acknowledge that you're just like everyone else, an imperfect being. As everyone is imperfect, you're also imperfect. And by focusing on what you were told was wrong with you, or focusing on what you were told was below average about you, or insufficient about you, or bad about you, that became your identity. And so you can change that. They did some research and they found that many of the men who ended up in jail were programmed to end up in jail because their mothers told them that they're worthless and they're going to end up in jail. And if you're told you're worthless and you're going to end up in jail, you might as well not try to do anything worthwhile. Just go into crime, because that's all you're good for. And then you make your money through crime, and then you end up in jail. It's just to be expected. So there's great power in people have great influence over us. What they say about us has great influence over us. And I think a great lesson that we can take from this, being aware of how we are affected by what other people say. We can be aware of how other people are affected by what we say about them. So let's be careful in our words. And if we have to correct somebody, let's be careful. You know, these are really good. Can I show you how to make them better? I mean, it depends on the relationship. You know, sometimes it's easy to correct someone because they know they're not a good cook and they know you're a good cook. Hey, can I show you how to make these? And they'll be flattered. Oh, please show me. So that's not a problem. But with sensitive people, it's a problem. But my general point is, we want to, as far as possible, we want to be encouraging. Hey, that was a great kirtan, that was a great class, or that prasadam you made was really good. You know, because people need it. Because just be aware that most people lack that feeling that they're really capable and intelligent. And if you have that feeling, it's going to show up in your productivity. You're not going to be as productive. You're not going to be able to do things as well as you could, or even start things that you could have started, because you just feel like you're not good at it. It's not. So why try? So you can help people a lot. And so be aware of that, you know, to encourage. Great this, great that. Really appreciate it when you do this. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for being who you are. Like things like that. It's like, wow, you know. And so if someone has been programmed negatively, by all the positive, it can start to override the negative. And so, you know, my whole life I was programmed negatively. Now I'm hearing so much positive, it'll start to balance it out. It's not necessarily something that's going to happen consciously, but it will balance it out naturally. Now, Ajita has a really good point, because Ajita is from Hong Kong. So Ajita is saying it's very common amongst Asians, children, that their parents, you know, the parents in their child's best interest want them to be number one. You be number one. You be best in your class. Yes? Yes, Ajita? Why you number two? You be number one. Yes? So, now, in case you're not good at math, I'll give you some insight. Only one person can be number one, not two. So, Mom, only one person can be number one, and I'm number two. So, is that okay? No, not okay. Number one. We need you number one. All right, now what do I do? You know, commit suicide, bang my head against a wall. You know, I don't think... Number one, Shirley Lee is number one. She's got an IQ of 5,800, you know, like she runs circles around Albert Einstein. I don't think I'll be number one, Mom. No, you must be number one. Number one, you must be number one. So, you know, so your mother, your father, they love you, they have your best interest in mind, they want you to be number one, because if you're number one, you're going to get a really good job, you're going to have security, you'll be successful. They just don't realize they just messed your whole life up by doing that, right? That's the unfortunate problem. And you like my Chinese accent? Is it okay? Maybe Ajita is going to say, no, it's not good. It's not Papa. I'm from China. I speak like this from China. Hare Krishna. We have to get confirmation from Ajita, because it may be a bogus Chinese accent. Or maybe like a outlying island of Hong Kong, maybe. Okay. So Ajita says, for a person with low self-esteem, sometimes it's even hard for them to believe compliments from the others, because they think they're good for nothing. How to deal with that, yeah. Okay, it's a really good question, and we've gone over time, but we're going to go over because this is a really good question. Thank you for asking that. Ajita, you are so intelligent. You ask such good questions. Okay, Ajita, now how are you going to deal with that? Everybody listen. I know it's been an hour and 20 minutes and you might be like hungry and spaced out and whatever. But listen to this, because it's really important. Low self-esteem, as we said, is your perception of yourself. That's how you see yourself. Now, we cannot possibly entirely see ourselves objectively. Now, when you have low self-esteem, you think you're seeing yourself in a low way, but actually you're seeing it through the eyes of those who put you down or minimized you or said you weren't perfect. Now, somebody comes along and says, actually, you are perfect. You are beautiful. You are intelligent. You are talented. It doesn't make any sense because you've been programmed the other way. As you've been programmed the other way, realize that your self-conception has been programmed by them. Allow yourself to be open to the idea that this person that's speaking to me now is coming from another perception of reality about me, which I am not aware of. And because this is a positive perception, it was very important for me to be open to that. Okay, this person is saying this about me. Now, I'll give you an example. We did a 6-day workshop, which was like 12 hours a day, which was very, I can't even describe what went on because I don't entirely understand what went on. But one of the things that went on during this workshop was just, really looking at ourselves and a lot of emotional issues coming up and really reflecting on like where are your obstacles, what's going on, what are you dealing with. And one of the exercises we did was that people would tell us how they saw us. This was a positive thing. How do you see him? How do I see you? So there were like 20 of us there or something, and then we would write down on a paper how we saw one another. So you'd get 20 people's opinions of you. And what people wrote down about me is something that honestly, it was the majority. It was like, I think 18 people wrote the same thing. And I can say, honestly, I never, ever thought of myself that way. And you might say, how could you not think of yourself that way? It's so obvious. Isn't that interesting? Like, maybe you're very intelligent, Ajita, but you don't think it. And I say to you, Ajita, you're so intelligent. And then another devotee in Hong Kong says, oh yeah, she's the smartest one among us. And you say, I never thought of myself that way. And everyone else says, oh, it's so obvious. How could you not think of yourself that way? So for some reason, we don't always see ourselves the way other people see us. So like 18 out of 20 people said the same thing. I don't remember what the other two said. I think the other two said, I'm a nice guy. Which I am most of the time. As long as the prasadam you cook for me is good, I'm a nice guy. So, and they said this other thing about me. And I said, oh my God, I never thought of myself that way. So you need to be open when people are giving you feedback about what's good about you, just to realize that this is how they see you, and their perception of you, because they're coming from a place where they're not trying to exploit you, put you down, or just being real about you as a friend, is probably more accurate than your program vision of yourself. So be open to it and think, wow, I never thought like that. Am I really like that? Oh yeah, Gita, you're really smart. Yeah, I just like you could run like Citibank. You're so smart. You're such a good manager and leader. And then all of a sudden, if you allow yourself to accept that, you think, wow, maybe I could. Yeah, let me think about that. So that's what you're supposed to do. But if you have low self-esteem, what's happening is it's creating a dissonance. Because you've been programmed to think you're whatever you have been programmed to think you are, that's not good. Now somebody comes and says something that's good, so there's dissonance. It's not harmonious. It's the two sounds that are dissonant. So it's making this little sound in your heart that's going, and it's like, stop it, isn't it? Stop making that sound, because that's what it sounds like to you, because it's not reinforcing what you believe about yourself. And you actually, it's like your heart, it's like it wants to hear something bad, and then you can say, yeah, I already know that. And then the bad is supposed to make you feel good, and the good is supposed to make you feel bad. That doesn't make any sense. So it's like you become so conditioned that you need someone, you can't hear anybody tell you you're bad because you take that personally and you already feel bad, and you can't hear anybody tell you you're good because you believe you're bad. So it's like, don't live, don't die. You understand the problem? I mean, isn't that the reality? You have low self-esteem. Someone says you're good, it makes you feel bad. And someone says you're bad, it makes you feel bad. But the cure is to be able to accept it when people say you're good and embody it and say, you really think I'm good? Well, let me consider your opinion. Let me consider your view, because I never thought of it that way. And that's exactly what Prabhupada did. I never thought I could be Krishna conscious. Oh yeah, chant Hare Krishna, you could become Krishna conscious. I never thought I could open a temple. Oh yeah, I have great faith in you. Go do it, try it, Krishna will help you. I never thought I could distribute big books. Oh yes, be sincere, pray to Krishna, you can do it. And then we did it. So that, Prabhupada gave us a vision we didn't have. But fortunately, we were open to that vision, so we could imbibe it. Is that okay? Did that answer your question? At least it's a start for an answer. Practice that, Ajita, if you can allow yourself to accept what other people are saying without rejecting it, without defending yourself and trying, because if you have low self-esteem and someone says a compliment, your basic response is, oh no, you're the one who has that, or no, I'm not like that. I'm really not like that at all. Actually, if you knew me, you would never, you'd never say that if you knew me. But thank you for it, but it's not really who I am. And it just makes you feel horrible, because you feel you're not like that, and somebody's seeing you like that, but you're really not like that. So you stop that thinking and say, wait a minute, this is how they see me. Maybe I am like that. Let me consider. Because that's the perception of someone else. So let me consider. Maybe that is the reality, and maybe my thinking of myself is not the reality. At least be open to that. Accept it, imbibe it, appreciate it in a humble way. Accept the compliment. I remember that during your workshop in Poland, we were having exercise that we were telling all the good that we see in other devotees. And I told lots of compliments, and one devotee after that, she started to cry and said that I have no good qualities. I was in shock to see it. Oh, that's so common. That is so common, because she's been programmed to feel like she's really bad. And that's the problem. And if you told her she has no good qualities, she would get angry at you, and she would also cry and feel bad. So if you tell her I have no good qualities, she says. She said that I have no good, oh, I'm sorry, okay, you have no good qualities, I'm sorry. And how is that going to make her feel? So like a devotee like that, she needs to be surrounded by people who can show her what her good qualities are. Because if you believe you have no good qualities, it's going to be really hard to be a devotee. Because as we said before, you don't care enough about yourself to maybe make it over your whole life as a devotee. And it's a very discouraging way of thinking. And, we want to be enthusiastic about serving Krishna. And the other point is, from a philosophical point of view, okay, you don't have any good qualities, everything you do is a failure. That's fine. Do your duty for Krishna to please him. That's all that matters. We don't care if you succeed or fail. We don't care if you're stupid. We don't care if you're incapable of doing anything. All we care is that you take this service and sincerely try to execute it, because that will please Krishna, and that's all he cares about. So just do it with detachment. So that's there also. Okay, whatever you think you are, still you can please Krishna. But obviously, if you can overcome that negative thinking, that will be better for you, because it's just so discouraging. Gautam says, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. I love Hare Krishna. Good. Ajita says yes. Yes to what? That's what your parents are like? Or Anuradha? Maybe you have to Oh, it's okay now. Okay. Did I get approval for my tiny accent? Hare Krishna. I'm just going to see if there's anything else out there you have to say. Yeah. Bhakti Athena says, Ajita is a wonderful devotee and a sweet girl. I know she is. She's one of the most wonderful. Krishna Karshani says, I've noticed that we don't see good in ourselves. We tend to not see it in others. Yeah. There's this one god brother I have. He's so amazing. He's always appreciating devotees. He's appreciating like very young devotees. He's appreciating their enthusiasm, their sincerity, their excitement, the fact that they're nice people. He's not appreciating their level of Krishna consciousness. He's not appreciating their level of humility, their level of compassion. He's appreciating their sincerity. So you don't have to have some great soul to appreciate. So that's a good point. What I've noticed about him is that sometimes we'll discuss something and we'll discuss a mistake some devotee's doing and he'll point it out. But there's absolutely no enmity in his heart towards that person. He's just pointing it out, that we shouldn't do this, we should do it this way because so-and-so did this and this is the result. It has no effect on his consciousness. So we were saying yesterday, for those of you who are in class, one thing about criticism is that sometimes as a leader you have to make it, but the point is it something you relish doing? You like it? Because if you do, that's a huge anartha. If you have to do it in your service and you don't like it, but you're doing it because you need to correct somebody, that's entirely different. So, So Krishna Karshani was saying, we don't see good in ourselves, we tend not to see it in others. So this devotee who sees good in others, he's very happy, he's very self-satisfied. He doesn't have like a big position, he doesn't have like thousands of disciples. It's like whatever he has, he's happy with. So that's, I think, why he's so generous in his praise of others, because he's so satisfied in himself and his own service. So that's a very important point. And it works the other way, What I fault in you I see is usually a fault in myself. So if I'm appreciating myself, I appreciate others. If I'm looking at all the bad in myself, I'll tend to see it in others. Kiran Mishra, can you please elaborate upon how we can be more sincere towards chanting? That's a different topic. And that you can go to my website under Japa, and you will have to spend the next 50 hours listening to the answer to your question. More than 50, because that's just audio. When you start to read the articles, you'll have to add another 2 hours. So everything you want to know is there. How to be more sincere. But if you want the short answer, Kiran, be more sincere. That's the short answer. And you have to listen to those 50 hours to understand why I gave you that answer. And after you listen to the 50 hours, you'll come back and say, now I understand why you gave me that answer. Now it makes sense. Interesting. So Krishna Karshani says, the devotee I said was crying after telling her compliments after she complimented her, was very critical towards others. Yeah, so that was my point. Earlier in the lecture I was saying some people who, not all, but some people with low self-esteem are dependent on others to pull them up, and when others come and don't pull them up, then they tend to blame and be critical of them. It's like, it has such a bad position to be in if you want to advance in spiritual life, because everything I've understood about criticism is basically we should just avoid it entirely. Even if there's reasons to criticize, it's a consciousness which is toxic and it should be avoided. Even if you have reasons to criticize, you should avoid it, because at that moment you're talking about it, you could be talking about something which would inspire your heart, but now you're talking about how stupid or mistaken or off as such and such devotee was. And you will see, at least I've seen, I have god brothers, and no matter how hard you try, you cannot get them to say anything bad about anybody. You can't. They won't. It's just their internal vow. So that's amazing. That's very amazing. And I think it's such a good example. Yes. Okay, so we're going to stop here. Is that okay? Have your permission? We've gone over time, but that's not unlikely. And tomorrow morning at 5:15 my time, if Florida still exists, and I'll have everything charged, so I can communicate electronically. So we'll have class at 5:15 a.m. my time, and then 6:15. One is on women, and one is on the topic of dissatisfaction. Yesterday we did the topic on dissatisfaction because I was thrown off. That's actually the Monday topic, and we were supposed to do this topic